Hi everybody, this is Jessica, and this is JessicaCast 5. Please like and subscribe, it means everything. Hi, my name is Jessica. So, this video is about bathrooms and should trans women be allowed to use them, specifically the women's bathroom. There's a lot of harmful myths about trans women hiding in bathrooms or in women's spaces. We are depicted as some sort of threat or predator, and it's not true. Where did these ideas even come from? Something about being transphobic that sells. I guess trans in general sells because everybody's always talking about it. Either you are for it or you're against it, but it's all over the place. This video is to be used as a tool to provide you with real information and real numbers that can be used to counter some of these harmful narratives. So one of the studies that is commonly used to attack trans people is a 2011 Swedish study. It claims that trans people are at a higher level of violence than regular cis people, right? Now, so the author of the study said it was mischaracterized, and I'll tell you how. So it followed two groups of trans people who had sexual reassignment surgery. One group happened before 1989, and one happened after 1989. The first group, they did not have a very high success rate, and their gender-affirming care was not as advanced. And these people suffered from greater mental disorders, and they had a higher level of criminality than cis people during that time. Now, what the study forgets to say, or they mischaracterize, is after medicine became more advanced and people knew more about gender-affirming care, the group of people after 1989, their mental health dramatically improved, and they were far less likely to get in trouble with the law. They actually were more comparable to cis women, and that's exactly what you would think would happen. If somebody is suffering from a mental disorder or from gender dysphoria, and they receive modern medical treatment, their quality of life improves, and they are able to socially transition, and they become members of society, and they don't have the sort of problems that they would have had otherwise. And that's how you know that it's working. It's a real thing, it's a real medicine, and we're grateful for it. Now, I have been digging around the internet, Googling things, and I cannot find any documented cases of trans people attacking women or children in bathrooms or really in general. In fact, women in general aren't attacked in public bathrooms. Women are normally attacked by somebody they know in their own home, somebody who they let in. But the idea that trans women are attacking people there's no real data to support. But then again, where did these ideas come from? One of the common attacks against gay people in the 70s was this idea that they were sexual deviants, right? That they shouldn't be allowed to be around children. And this is what I hear all the time, is that you can do whatever you want, but stay away from the children. What people are really saying is that there's something wrong with trans people, and that they are some sort of predator, or they would not be a good parent, or they need to be kept away from the kids. And they're not allowed to go into a women's room and use the bathroom because there's a good chance they're just gonna attack a woman, right? There's no data to support it. In fact, trans people get into much less legal trouble and go to prisons or jails at a rate much lower than men. Now, they are slightly above women, but much closer in line with that of cis women. I don't know how to determine what prison or jail a trans person should go to. That has to be done by legal professionals and doctors and people like that. I mean, I have my own opinions, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about, are trans women a threat to women and children? And the data overwhelmingly says no. So why does this happen, right? Why do people believe these things? Transphobia sells, right? And a lot of influencers and a lot of media people know that, right? Now let's talk about a high-profile Canadian case that happened. I would say it was about 7 years ago, so probably around 2018. And her name was Jessica Unive. Jessica Unive, she was in Canada, and she was a trans woman who would go into waxing salons, and she would want to be waxed. And the women that worked there said they didn't feel comfortable doing it. They thought that her request was in bad faith. She tried to sue these salons, and she lost that case, right? There was also allegations that she was having topless parties for children and communicating with children online. Now, this story was picked up by Blair White, who is a very prominent and beautiful trans woman influencer, right? Blair, in her early videos, they were very informative and good. But at a certain point, she started picking what she believed were not real trans people who are committing sex crimes or who are predatory in nature, and that's what a lot of her stories became about. And she made this video about Jessica Unive, and it blew up, and that's really what made Blair White go viral and become famous. I would like to say that I am not here to defend Jessica Unive. That is a disturbing story, and if she did anything wrong, she should be prosecuted and go to jail. But the thing is that she's never been prosecuted or convicted of assaulting a woman or a child. She's had legal problems, right? Now, when I look at Jessica Unive, I think this is a person that has some sort of mental illness, right? She definitely needs some kind of help. I'm not a doctor, and she could be guilty of some of these things that they say. The problem is that she's never been tried, and there is no evidence to suggest that she has ever harmed a woman or a child. Now, in Blair White's video, she does say that this is allegedly. She says it over and over, almost kind of like a joke, right? The thing is that millions of people saw that video, and for some reason, it doesn't matter if it's real or if it's fact-based, when people hear these stories, they love it. There's something about transphobia or hating trans people that sells, right? You get clicks. That's why Blair White's channel has now devolved into just trashing people who she deems not real trans. Now, that gets me to, how can we decide who the good ones are and who the bad ones are, right? Who are the real trans? I'm very pretty, I think I am, and maybe I must be one of the real ones. I'm taking hormones, I must be one of the real ones, right? The problem is that you cannot decide who is a real trans or who's not a real trans. So if you dig enough, you will probably find cases that have been sensationalized of people who committed these crimes and then they decided they wanted to transition. Or maybe they decided to transition before they committed the crimes. I'm sure that it has happened. I'm not going to say that it hasn't happened, right? But when it's the students. Coffee break, Cool Beans coffee, get some. Okay, so what the hell was I saying? Okay, any statistical data that's available is that it shows that trans women are less likely to harm a woman or a child, and they are more likely to be harmed, right? When people get mad at other influencers for sensationalizing these stories and the same stories that are used to create legislation, the reason why it's such a terrible thing is because it's not real. Now, if there was an army of trans women out there hiding in all the bathrooms, molesting people, then I would be there too. I'd say, we gotta shut this down, right? But it's not real. There's no data to support it. So the only requirement for being trans is that a person wants to transition or states that their gender identity is trans. That's the only requirement. If we allow other people to determine who is or is not transgendered, we are going to create a gatekeeping tool that will be used to attack trans people. Now, people will say, oh, you're being crazy, this isn't really happening, right? So Matt Walsh, who is a prominent influencer from the Daily Wire, he was on Tucker Carlson, one of the biggest shows in the world, just last week. And they said that if you are in a same-sex relationship, you should not be allowed to adopt children and you shouldn't have access to surrogacy. That it would be better for foster children to grow up without a family at all than to be raised in a house that has a same-sex couple. Now, these people are influencing the population. Millions of people are listening and probably agreeing with those statements that you couldn't say before, right? So Florida in 2015 was the last state to abolish laws against same-sex couples having adopted children. But now the right-wing influencers are just openly saying it. And we know for sure that the President of the United States listens to Tucker Carlson. Sometimes they have direct conversations that influence policy. So when people are saying nobody is trying to take away your rights, they are actually trying to take away your rights. And these aren't even just trans people, right? They're going for gay people and lesbians. So I'm sure they think that trans people need to stay away from the kids. That's what we hear all the time. That is one of the biggest comments that I get. We don't care what you do, just stay away from the kids. By the way, I'm a parent. I have 2 children. My 22-year-old has a disability and I have raised him his entire life. And I also have my 9-year-old I co-parent, right? So I'm a good parent. In fact, the data does not suggest that same-sex couples are bad parents. It actually shows the opposite. These children grow up in stable houses and have a better quality of life in many cases than their cis counterparts, or like if they have cis parents. So how do we determine who should be allowed to use a bathroom? Should trans people be allowed to use a bathroom? Should they have to go into the men's room or the women's room? Well, let me tell you something. You can't stop trans people from using the bathroom. So either trans women or trans men are going into the women's bathroom. So either you want someone that looks like me, able to use the public women's restroom, or you want somebody that looks like a man, or somebody who is a trans man, right? See, even I have a hard time with the language, right? So my point is that either trans women or trans men are going into a woman's restroom. So if you go by the biology or the chromosomes or whatever other language they're trying to weaponize right now, that means a trans man who has been taking testosterone that might have facial hair, a big strong chest, and a fade, right? He's gonna have to go into the women's room. So we're not getting around trans people using I'm sorry, trans people are allowed to pee, right? Trans women are not a threat. The media and influencers have exploited high-profile cases that are not reflective of the data or the actual trans community or the population, right? They do this because they're trying to push a narrative or because being trans sells. For good, for bad, being trans sells, right? Transphobia is very popular and loving trans people is very popular. Just look at my DMs. We are not going to determine who are the real or the fake trans because self-identification can be the only identifier, right? We can never allow other people to have that kind of power and determine who is a legitimate trans or not a legitimate trans. That means it does not matter if somebody has gender dysphoria. Somebody could transition just because they want to look like a woman, because they want to express themselves, or because they want access to straight men. I don't care. It's not up to me to decide these things, right? I am here to defend all people who claim to be trans. Now, as far as, oh, I'm sorry, I'm almost done.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Thanks. So if somebody gets caught lurking in a bathroom, how do we deal with that person? Well, they should be prosecuted. They should go to a trial, and if they're guilty, they should go to prison. Now, they need to be judged on what they do. If they harm somebody, that's what they get judged for. They cannot be judged for being trans. They cannot be judged for what they look like. They cannot be judged for not being pretty enough. Being a real trans is not a real thing. We're not picking the pretty ones and giving them all kinds of privileges. Sorry. Now, this brings us to the most infamous trans woman who has ever lived, Blair White. Listening to her 7 years ago when I was imagining my possible future of being a beautiful trans woman. And I'm not joking. She is beautiful and infamous and very intelligent. She has done more to destroy trans women and public opinion of trans women.
Topless swimming parties with kids.
Out of the 2 million trans people in America, she picks the worst 10 and she puts it on her YouTube with millions of subscribers. And her first video, which was made about Jessica Unive, went super viral, and it kind of catapulted her into superstardom. And she is a superstar. She's the token, beautiful, normal trans woman.
Is allegedly.
And honestly, that's what I wanted to be for a while. Like, I thought, I would just be middle of the ground. Like, I'm gonna be one of these pretty trans women who exposes the bad ones.
Person is trying to host topless parties for minors.
And it's terrible. Every time I open up my YouTube channel, because I'm subscribed to her, okay, caught me, it's another video of her trashing some trans women. And there probably are disturbing behavior. Like, Jessica Unive is disturbing, but when I really listen to what Jessica Unive is saying, I think she has some kind of mental problem. And that doesn't excuse her behavior, but she probably needs some kind of psychological help, right? I don't know. But she is not a good representation of trans women.
They're actually getting women's spas shut down.
There's just, right in my neighborhood, I only know 3 trans women that live close to me. And all 3 of them are completely different personalities, and they're all beautiful people. And Blair White could make a show on on any of them, right? But instead, she chooses the worst one she can find, the worst one, right? So Blair White, you are the most infamous and dangerous trans woman I have ever encountered. Bye. So I wanted to say thank you for Cool Beans Coffee Shop for letting me use this space to make my video. They're out of Fort Pierce, Florida, and their coffee is delicious. If you are around Fort Pierce and you want to have like an awesome environment, there's an art school and the art students run this place, and they make delicious coffee. So please go there. Thanks.